Welcome to another episode of Little Prince. Before we get into our episode, which is very exciting, we have a guest today. That's right. Another full human body
A
is
real
joining
person.
us on today's episode. We want to give a shout out to Ghost Energy, who is not a sponsor,
Yet
but we will be drinking it anyways.
we are. And coffee.
Yeah.
Are we clicking this? Hold on. My nails are not going under it. Oh my God. This thing is. Oh, hold on. Here it is. Here it is. Hold on.
We've got
Sometimes you gotta
this.
wiggle in it.
So
There it is.
phallic.
And I did not squirt this time.
Fantastic. All right. So, in today's episode, we have the Hannah Bird.
The Hannah.
The Hannah Bird, author of many published books, indie
lot.
author, a mama,
Soon to be.
mama,
Soon to be.
this month, who took time to be here today with us. Thank
Yeah,
you
I'm
so
sure
much, Hannah.
He's annoyed.
Yeah, thank you so much. We will keep it light. We will keep it quick. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to pass it over to JV.
There I go. Hi, Hannah.
Hey, thank you guys
Thank you
so
for
much
coming on. So I know. Okay, we said that you're supposed to have your baby this month. What's your actual due date?
I mean, God willing, this month. She's due technically on May 31st.
So probably not.
Yeah, could be a June baby, but I've been like, I won't bore you guys with labor details, but the doctor, she's huge, basically. She's measuring like 2 weeks ahead. So,
No.
yeah. So they're like trying to evacuate her.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, it's been a minute for me. Closer for Tyler. She's a 1-year-old. I'm like, my PTSD has already made me forget all the things.
I told Andrew that's the only way we'd ever have another is if I get amnesia.
No, and it's weird how bodies work like that because you will,
We do.
I mean, not the first few weeks. I remember my husband like, oh, it's so cute. Let's have another one. I was like, respectfully.
Yeah, you're like,
Um,
your uterus didn't just do that. Get out of here.
yeah, but soon he was like, we want
Yeah.
another one.
When they measured me, I was 36 weeks, and they measured her at 7 pounds 12 ounces already. And my husband's first reaction was, "Oh, maybe she'll sleep through the night. Like she'll sleep really well because she'll be bigger." And I was like, "You skipped the part where I have to birth her."
Where she has to come out first.
He was like, "Oh, yeah, sorry about that."
Yeah, men are funny like that. But maybe she will sleep through the night. But I mean, I've had fat baby. Look, you know what? Like, you probably get it from everybody at this point, right? You're getting all the unsolicited advice. Are you? Yeah.
I think I'm the youngest of 6 children, and all of my siblings have their kids. So my daughter will be the 12th grandchild on my side.
Wow.
Plus, all of my friends have had their children because I'm from the South. And so
You're a late bloomer.
I'm a late bloomer. When I got married, I was 28, 27.
Math.
I can't
I get it.
remember. I was 27, and that was like the oldest anyone's ever gotten married in my family. But so I've like gotten all the advice my whole life, I feel like. At this point,
good.
I kind of ignore what I don't want.
Man, I mean, you got to that point way faster than I did. Because to me, it was still very much like all the pressure, all the things. Yeah, this is how your birth should be. Breastfeeding should be super easy, blah, blah. And like
Yeah.
in the end, none of it worked out for me. And I think it set me up for disappointment.
It does. I think that's the biggest problem with the way that people talk to women. And so we hired a doula because of the type of birth that I'm going for. And even sometimes like the things they say, I'll just be like, I'll wait till they leave. And then I turn to Andrew and I'm like, so this is how we're actually going to do that?
That is so smart. Man, you're way ahead of the curve. That's good. I think you're like emotionally prepared for this.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I might get I'm probably about to get really humbled.
I mean, you know what? Not gonna lie, having kids is definitely like a genetically life-changing kind of experience. Like it changes every aspect about you. What do you think, Tyler?
Oh, I 100% agree. So my son is turning 14 months at the end of this month, the 31st. And yeah, everyone was like, oh, it's just like having a big poop. Never in my life did I have a poop like that. Okay.
Maybe everyone in your life has really severe IBS.
No idea. But my
Because I'm
son
gonna be honest,
was
a couple times they've said things, and I'm like, "Meh, I do that with my IBS all the
yeah. Yeah, my son was 8 pounds, 8 ounces.
time."
He
Nice.
was born at home in my bed
Hell yeah.
because that's how far we made it. Yeah.
My
Tyler, I had no
mother-in-law,
idea.
my husband banned me from a home birth because that was what I wanted. And my mother-in-law is terrified that I won't want to go
To the
until it's too
hospital.
late.
Well, you know what? What happened with me is I was gonna have a water birth. I booked like a
Oh,
birthing
that's so
center.
nice.
Sounded great, right? I was like, yeah, just sit in a pool and then push out a baby. That never actually happened because I was having contractions and they're like, you're a first time mom. You don't know what you're
Yeah,
talking about. I was like, no, I think I need you to come here
love
to
to tell
check
you
me.
that.
Yeah, because I had a midwife and they came and they were like, "Oh, your centimeters dilated. We're not going anywhere, actually."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, okay." So we never made it to the birthing center, but home birth was amazing. I had 12 women that were like all due in the same month,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of them did home birth.
Yeah.
And it was so nice. And the people who are there are medically trained.
Yeah.
Like they have full like ambulance kits. Like they come
Uh-huh.
upstairs with like everything that you need. So I'm sad that to hear that you're being banned from home birth because it was not expected, but very much appreciated.
Yeah, my brother was born at home. I would have been born at home, but my mom was GBS positive with me, so she had to have me at the hospital. But oh my gosh, my brother did. Because she had GBS, that was before they tested for it, and he
Mm.
ended up hospitalized for a month because he developed meningitis.
Oh,
But
bummer.
Andrew is terrified of all things birth, and so he's like, I would feel much better if we were in a hospital. And I was like, fair enough. So we'll see
I
how it
guess
goes.
so.
Totally fair.
You make
Yeah.
those compromises. Meanwhile, me, I had all three of my kids at the hospital. They were all cut out of me. I
And that's
tried.
at this
I
point,
tried.
I am anticipating with her being so large. None of my sisters have had a successful vaginal birth
Yeah,
because the it just has never gone that way.
same.
So we'll see, how things go with her measuring so big. But my mom had me naturally, and I was 8 pounds 14 ounces. So
All of mine were my babies were all chunky too. But and you know what? Growing up, I have an ass. Like I'm very German. I got hips
yeah,
and all the
yeah.
bottom. And so growing up, my parents were like, "You have birthing
Birthing
hips." Blah blah blah.
hips.
No, my pelvic
I
opening
have tiny hips. Like I am very narrow
narrow.
hipped.
Yeah.
I am shaped like a triangle or an offensive line, as one of my boyfriends once told me.
Oh, fuck that guy. Ex boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my parents lied to me. I may have birthing hips, but I did not have a birthing pelvic
Cervix.
opening. So, they just didn't drop. They never dropped. I labored for 26 hours with number one, cut her out. Labored for 16 hours with number two. They
Oof.
cut her out. By number three, I was like, guess what we're
Yeah.
doing? We're scheduling a date.
Yeah.
And it was so peaceful.
Yeah. My sister always says her scheduled C-section was like
Oh,
the best because she had
it
done
was
the same
beautiful.
with her first, like just labored and her hips never separated. So we'll see what mine do, but the
They'll do
doctor
something.
feels yeah, the doctor feels good. All of the prodromal labor that I've had has been in my hips, and so I'm like, maybe my body's doing something, but we'll
I want
see.
to say that's good, but, I'm sorry that you're having to,
You never know. It's
you
not
never know.
bad. It's just like a real big
Uncomfortable.
tease.
Yeah.
So are you writing while you're like getting ready to have this like bring a new person into this world, or
No.
are you just taking it easy?
I've struggled a lot to write since getting pregnant. Obviously, first trimester it was hard to write because I was just sick all the time.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't think I had like 10 chapters left to write in every heartbeat after when I found out I was pregnant. And so I was like kind of right at the home stretch. And but then I couldn't write for like 3 months, and then it was really slow going after that.
Why do you
So
think that is?
I think just like the creativity is really sucked out of you. And then also I think writing romance, I
You
did
weren't
not.
feeling romantic?
Yeah, I didn't have one of those pregnancies that women have where they're like, I wanted to jump my husband's bones. I was like, I don't want anyone to touch me.
Uh-huh.
I do not feel like a sexual being. I don't want to think about sex. And so, like, writing romance, I was like, ugh.
Yuck. Well, and your hormones change, right?
Yeah.
I notice, and so Hannah, do you feel that way when you're writing is a romance author? Um, trauma,
Trauma romance. Yeah.
trauma romance, although
Rom
Every
com.
Heartbeat After was like a little fluffier
Yeah.
than
Every heartbeat
like
after ended up lighter. And that wasn't on purpose. It was just like the characters. Every time I would try to like take a scene in a serious direction, they would crack a joke. And I'd be like,
they were
well,
like, no.
that's just their personality, I guess. And
I liked it
so, yeah,
because
it was.
we read The Cost of Forgetting You for last month's book
Mhm.
club. Hannah and I happen to be in the same book club, and that was like heavier, right?
Yeah,
So
that
this
one
was
was
nice.
probably I would say The Cost of Forgetting You, it's not that it's my heaviest, in my opinion. I think Promise Me This is extremely heavy due to the subject matter because it deals with stillbirth.
Yeah.
But The Cost of Forgetting You is heavier to a lot of people because there are dual endings, and one of the endings is not view. It's like very much a bittersweet kind of like one person gets a happy ending, but in order for that person to have a happy ending, the other person can't. And so it's kind of like, not that they don't have a happy ending, but they have a realistic ending. And
I
so,
love that book. Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning because it's a dual POV.
Mhm.
And Hannah, please stop me if you feel like I'm giving away too much of the plot, but it's a dual POV, and it's the dad who
Mhm.
is the male POV,
Yeah.
and his daughter is the female POV,
Mhm.
which I thought was so different because when you read a romance with a dual POV, you expect them to be the MMC and the FMC, right?
Yeah.
Like the love interests. And so I thought that was such a genius way to write that book. And it gives you so much more insight and perspective that it makes the trauma so much more devastating, I feel like,
Yeah. I
which
thought,
I
I
love.
think with that story, I was really, and I think I talked about this with you, but I really wanted to explore the like idea that our parents are people we'll never really know. Like we know them as our parents, but we'll never know all the nuance of like who they were before. And especially as I'm stepping into parenthood, I think about like the places I've traveled and the people I've loved and the boys I've hooked up with, like just like all these things that make you who you are that my child will never really know about me or understand to a certain extent. And so I think like that was kind of what I was doing with that book was because the male or the father's POV is in the past and then it kind of catches up to the present, whereas in the present she's caring for him and he has dementia. And so you're kind of getting the backfill of the story from his perspective of who he is and who he's been his whole life. And there's some things that Delilah will never know about him, and some things she does learn throughout the course of the story. But I think that makes him more human to us than just that's her dad. You know,
And
he's not just her dad; he's
true.
Henry.
Yeah, I love that because like I feel like that happens as you get older, right? First of all, you start to realize that your parents who growing up were all knowing, right?
Yeah, they're human.
Aren't. They're very
Mhm.
human with all the mistakes and
Mhm.
all the faults that they have. And you recognize that as and especially once you step into parenthood yourself, right? And you're like, oh my God, all the ways I'm gonna fail my own child
Yeah,
because I'm just human. And we're trying so desperately to fight against that. But I loved at the end. My mom's passed. She passed 5 years ago. There's a lot I don't know about her because my mom was not a nostalgic person.
yeah,
She didn't like taking pictures. She didn't like telling stories from her past. And my dad's the complete opposite. So I'm learning things about him where he's like, well, that one time when I was a cab driver, I'm like, when were you
yeah,
ever a cab driver? Excuse me?
yeah.
It's I love that. So I loved The Cost of Forgetting You. Plus, it's just a gorgeous fucking cover.
My
All your covers are so beautiful.
my great grandfather lived to be almost 101. I never had really like grandparents. My mom's parents passed before I was born, and my dad's parents are just, it's a whole other story. But his grandparents, my great grandfather and my great grandmother, were alive when I was born. And his wife, they were married 78 years. And she passed when she was like 95. And then he lived a little bit longer. And so he used to tell us all kinds of stories. And it was stuff like that. You just random, like, you have to think this man was born in 1908.
He's seen
So
everything. So much
he was
change.
alive for the Titanic sinking. He was alive for Prohibition and the like Roaring Twenties and World War. Like, he saw the invention of the computer and the cell phone and all of that stuff in his lifetime. But it was just so funny to hear him randomly tell stories about, like, oh, that time he used to like one time he jumped on a train like a homeless person. He hopped on a train to get to the next town, and it's like, get on a
I know.
train. Like,
It's
he just
insane.
ran and jumped on to one of the rail cars and like hit and got to the city. And I'm like, it's just wild to hear those random stories and think like that was somebody's real life. And those people fell in love. And I think that's like one of the concepts with romance that I love writing, is that you get to look at people in the world and think, who has loved this person and who has this person loved, and how did that play out, and how did they grieve, and how did they, all of the things that go into that. So that's like, I don't know, The Cost of Forgetting You was really hard to write because it took a lot of research and it took a lot of mental fortitude. But it was also really rewarding because I was able to explore those concepts that I love so much, you know?
Yeah. No, I totally get it. Do you generally do a lot of well, let me ask you this. Are you I know this about you
Yeah.
because we talked about it, but I'm asking for the general audience. Are you a plotter or a pantser? And for those who don't know the differences, a plotter is obviously somebody who plots the story,
Uh-huh.
and a pantser is someone who just flies by the seat of their pants. So
Yeah.
which one are you, my friend?
Very much a plotter. I usually plot out, and there's different levels to plotting.
Yeah.
I am probably at the extreme end of it where I write out like a full outline of every chapter for the book before I ever write it. And then obviously am open to changes as the story progresses. If it gets to a point where I'm like, this beat doesn't hit where it should, I'll move scenes around, or like, but it very closely resembles, like, the end product very closely resembles the plot that I wrote in the beginning.
Yeah.
My new venture that I'm like working on plotting right now, it may end up being somewhere in between. I've written a lot of, like, I've written the whole synopsis and then I've written out a lot of chapters and beats, but it also may be one that kind of like I'll have to start it without completely having everything planned. Um,
How do you feel
but
about that?
um,
See? Anxious?
it's anxiety inducing because I'm afraid of like hitting stalls, which
Yeah.
I think a lot of my pantser friends like run into those issues because they hit a wall and they're like, either they don't know where to go from there, or they realize that something was screwed up because they didn't plan it out in advance. And so they have to kind of either restructure. Like, I write really clean first drafts because my process beforehand is so intense.
Yes.
And so I don't have to do as much heavy lifting on editing. I mean, obviously I edit, but I don't have to do a lot of rearranging because I've looked at it from the 1,000-foot view before I wrote it, and so I kind of mapped it. And I'm afraid of hitting that like problem where I write it and then I finish and I'm like, "Ugh, I have to fix all of this, you know?"
I think it'll be fine. I mean, as a pantser, because we've talked about this before, I'm very much a pantser. I have an idea and then it just kind of blossoms around it. I don't know necessarily that I've ever like stalled where I'm like, oh, this is all messed up. But of course, I know exactly what you mean. The manuscript that for the book that I'm writing now, which is the third book in my series, I actually started writing in 2022 because I never anticipated publishing any of it.
Yeah.
But, now going back, and you learn as a writer,
Oh
right?
my
You get
gosh,
you
yeah.
get
From
better,
every
and
that you publish.
yes, everything, everything. And the more you read too, your language will change and like your sentence structure will change. It's just constantly evolving. And so now I published book 2 in March. I'm going back to obviously whatever I had written for book 3, and I'm like, oh shit, this is crap. So now I have to like basically rewrite, which I think is almost harder than just
It is.
writing from scratch. So I can
It,
definitely see the advantages of plotting, but I'm just not a plotter. I don't know how you do that. That is
I think
so
everybody's brain is just
awesome.
wired one particular way, and it's
Yeah.
really hard to switch from one to the other. Like,
Yep.
if you're not naturally, I mean, I am a plotter the same way that I am anally prepared for everything in my life. And so I think it's just kind of like innate
Yeah.
that I would be that way. But I also have friends that like they thrive best writing 2 weeks before deadline. And that would give me, I'd throw up. So it's just like however your brain works, whatever works to get the story on paper, like there's no wrong way to do it. So many people that want to write, I don't know if this has happened to you since you published, but it's like people start talking to you, they find out you're a writer, they're like, "Oh, I've always wanted to write a book, but I don't know where to
Yep.
start. What's the process look like?" And I'm like, it's different for every single person.
Yeah. It has to feel right for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different for everyone. And Tyler and I were talking about this before, where it's like it takes all kinds of kinds, right, to make the world go
Yes.
round. And it's the same for writing, and your style isn't going to match with every reader, but you're going to
No.
find your people, you're going to find your way.
And it'd be very boring if it was all the same. Like that's the benefit of it, is that every book is different. I read books sometimes and I'm like, how did your brain, like your beautiful, beautiful brain, come up with that?
All the
And
time.
all
All
the
the
time. Yeah.
Yes,
I say I'm not going to write anything else. My friend Allie and I that published the
that- was
Time
it
of
your
Conversation Hearts,
yeah, the
we have
novella?
um we have 4 total plotted in that series. And so because of the pregnancy, and then she is publishing or just published another book called Not a Strong Enough Word, which I highly recommend. We got delayed on some of those, but I might like fit we depending on how our schedule ends up with that, I'll dilly dally and like write a couple chapters here and there for those. But in terms of like my next full length project, I won't write anything else until I've written my plan. It's a trilogy, and so my plan is to write the first, hopefully have it go on sub January of next year, and then write the second while it's on sub. And then if it doesn't get picked up, I'll publish it myself next fall and
Very
kind
nice.
of keep going from there. Benefit of being an indie published author is that you know that you don't need like it'd be nice, but if it's not what I like, then I'll just publish it myself.
Yep, that's a nice way. So important to note, obviously you're an indie author, so am I. Definitely advantages, right? But so you and I, we talked when we went to brunch, because I get to go to brunch and book club with her. Be jealous. Um, w- y- you have 2 sisters who are authors as well, right?
Yeah.
And was one of them you mentioned was trad published at one point?
Yeah, one of them wrote for Harlequin for like 10 years.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure that was a ton of pressure too.
Yeah, that's why she doesn't write for them anymore.
But she's still an author.
No, there are benefits to that process. The biggest issue I think comes from who your editor is. So for those who don't know, when you trad publish versus indie publishing, I, as the indie author, can write my manuscript. I hire an editor. I hire a cover designer. I make the final decision on all of that stuff, and I pay a really good amount of money to make sure I have really
Really good money.
polished, professional end products.
Yeah.
As a trad author, you your agent would take your manuscript unedited and pitch it or submit it to editors from different publishing houses, and that editor then has to want it and make an offer on it, and then they will edit it, they design the cover, they pick the title. You don't really have a say in what that final product is. If you have a good editor, they might be more collaborative. If you don't have a collaborative editor, they're not really obligated to be collaborative. So It can go either way. Benefit of that is you get an advance up front, and you will most likely be in like bookstores and all of that stuff. However, you don't see another dime until you earn out that advance. Benefit of indie author is that you make every bit of, I mean, obviously we have to share with Amazon or whoever we publish through, but you make all of your royalties. However, negative, nobody's putting you in bookstores without you hunting them down, kind of thing. So, there's caveats to either. But she had an editor that was not very collaborative, and this is not unique to her experience because I know other trad authors that have gone through similar things where like for example, they came to her one year and said, hey, babies are in, you have to add a baby to this story.
You told me that story. I
Yeah.
remember it.
And so she rewrote this story, struggled through it, got it written with a baby in it. And then her editor said, oh, actually, we have too many babies coming out next year, so your book's not going to be published for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
And she was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So, there's just things like that become really out of your control. So I told my agent very early on when we started discussing submitting this story, I was like, it's very important to me that whoever, if anyone makes an offer, all a big if, that I would want to see what proposed edits they have and make a decision from there, because I'm open to collaborative writing, but I'm not open to being told what to write and publishing a book that's not my heart. Like I put so much into these stories and I care a lot about how they're portrayed and how they end. And I don't ever want to put something out in the world with my name on it that I wouldn't have written otherwise.
Yeah.
So that's really an important part of the process to me. And if I don't feel like anybody is going to match that, then I'll just do it myself.
No, I'm with you. That's always been one of the things that drew me most to self-publishing, is just because I'm a control freak and I like retaining that creative control. I write the books I want to read.
Same.
So,
and that's
yeah.
kind of been like when I started, I knew I was going to write stories with topics that are not kosher in the bigger market. Like,
Yes.
editors are really hesitant to touch stories about stillbirth or child abuse or like things that real
Yes.
people go through, especially in the romance genre. They want
Fluffy.
easy to solve problems.
Yes.
And I never could read a romance novel and relate to a character whose biggest issue was that they had commitment phobia because their parents divorced. I'm like, cry me a river.
Not deep enough. Not deep enough.
Yeah, not deep enough.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wasn't going to write stories like that. And I knew that they wouldn't be for everyone.
Yeah.
But the people they're for, it is really important. And the messages I've gotten from people that are like, it meant the world to me to see myself reflected in this character. Like that's
100%.
all of it.
I agree. Isn't that like the best feeling? I've had that before where somebody reached out to me and said, this is insane. Like, it's like you wrote the story about me and my partner. We saw ourselves reflected in this. And that is like, I mean, our reach might be not as far as some of the trad published authors. Not
deep.
that trad published makes it easier by any means, right? Because there are so many trad published authors who never go anywhere. But I
That's
don't
why
know.
I said if you weren't out your advance, because
yes.
for every Rebecca Yaros, there are a million others who publish one book and never earn out their advance, and that's it.
Although an advance would be nice, I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah,
that was the best Southern accent.
I got a translation contract in Poland for the Loveless series, and that was real nice.
That is really nice. I would love an advance on something because, as an indie author, it's all out of pocket. All of it. The editor, the marketing, the book cover, all the things. So I want to talk to you a little bit about, we made you fill out a questionnaire, right?
Yes.
So some lighter subjects.
I've forgotten everything I put on it.
Well, let me surprise you then. And Tyler, feel free to jump in at any time because Tyler's still here. Hi.
Hi, yes, I'm still here. I'm actually just really, as a reader, I'm not an author. I can't even put words together to write an email. Come on. But to sit and to listen, and I know that I've been silent, but it's been on purpose because I've been learning so much from an author's perspective of what goes into the books. And when it comes to indies, I'm gonna explain a little bit about myself. I'm a novice reader. I honestly only started like reading books last year, and it was when I was very heavily pregnant. I was like, I don't have very many mobility options,
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna pick up a book.
Whatever are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So I really like this whole thing, like prior to pregnancy, maybe a book a year. And so for me to learn about the differences between indie and trad, like my perception was indie authors, all authors started as indies. And then they maybe got picked up by a traditional publishing house. And like learning that there's so many more positives to being an indie. Like I had no idea that you didn't have control over so much if you're being traditionally published. And that is shocking as the work that goes into writing a book has to be very similar indie or trad.
Oh,
The author is going through a lot of the same processes, a lot of the same stressors, all of that stuff. And then to have so much of your freedom on something that your brain created
uh-huh.
taken away is insane to me.
I always I love the story. There's an author, Alessandra Torre. She writes like suspense. She started as an indie and then got picked up. And she always talks about when she had her first trad book, the publishers came to her with 3 cover options and said, which one do you like? And she said, oh, I thought I was being so helpful. I was like, any of them except for this one. I don't like this one, but you can go with any of the others. And guess which one they went with?
The one she
The one
didn't
she didn't like.
like.
Uh-huh. And that's just like at the end of the day, I was trying to explain that I'm in a fantasy romance subreddit on Reddit, and somebody was commenting on the new Callie Hart cover for Quicksilver, like the trad published
Mhm.
version. And they were like, oh, why would she choose this? This cover's so ugly. And I was like, she doesn't choose that. Like, she chose that one, but she doesn't choose her trad cover. It's whatever the publisher thinks is going to sell. My dog's going to pop in. So yeah, there's just, but I don't want it to sound, obviously I'm striving for trad because that's the whole point of going on sub. So I'm not saying there's no pros to it, because obviously the dream,
Absolutely.
like
There is.
I told my
Yeah.
husband, I was like, if we could sell this trilogy and I could get enough of an advance to like stay home. I mean, I work from home, but I have a full-time job. And if I could make enough of an advance to like just write and raise our child and not have to pay daycare costs, then that would be I'd have much more energy to write because I wouldn't be on a computer working all day and then have to also write in the evenings. Um,
100%.
and
Yeah.
so
As a
things like that
oh,
there are benefits to it. I don't want there to sound like
oh.
there's not.
No, but it's shocking to hear because like it sounds like the end goal is to always get to trad. Like,
Yeah,
to
not for
get
everyone.
into bookstores and stuff. Yeah, but not for everybody. And that's really enlightening to know. Um, I guess I don't know if you would know this, but if you are under a traditional publishing house, are you able to also indie write, or is it like in a contract where you can only?
It
Okay.
depends on how you negotiate your contract. So there's something called the right of first refusal, and most trad contracts will negotiate the right of first refusal, which means that if you write anything, they get the first dibs on it. And the problem with that is they don't do it quickly. It's not like you send them your manuscript and they get back to you within a week and say, yeah, we don't want it, you can self-publish it. They, can take 6 months, a year, whatever. And then you're like, because nothing in trad is quick.
Yeah.
Except for if they pick up an indie author that's already published, then it's pretty quick. But yeah, that's only really become so common in recent years, which I have a lot of opinions about that I won't even go into. But it is, yeah. But like H.D. Carlton, for example, who wrote Does It Hurt and Haunting Adeline and all of that, she chooses to stay indie. She's in all the bookstores because she was making bank as an indie author, and she's like, why would I sell you these rights? I think she has like a contract with a distributor because it was like too much to kind of go through um, traditional like or indie distribution channels, but she does that herself. Willow Winters, she stays indie. She is super prolific writer, makes a ton of money doing it. She literally like has a warehouse herself and runs it all herself because she was like, I make all the money. Why would I'm doing great by myself. Why would I involve somebody else and give them a percentage of my royalties? So for those types of people, that's, HD Carlton, hell yeah, girl, like made it on a Times Square like billboard as an indie author.
Wow.
Yeah. That is the
Wow.
stuff, right? I mean, everybody, I guess I mean, I'm not gonna lie, we all strive for that. And I'm exactly in the same shoes as you, Hannah. I would love to, right? I mean, we squeeze it in where we can. I
Mm-hmm.
work 50 hours a week or more, and there are children and the family and all the
Yep.
things. And it would be, I keep telling my husband all the time, I mean, how nice would it be to, get an advance on a book.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can
Mhm.
take some actual time off and focus on
Right.
writing
Mm-hmm.
and not, and because so much of what we do as indies isn't writing. We
Yeah.
do a lot of it. We
Marketing
have to,
and
but there's
editing and promo
oh, the
work and all that
marketing and
nonsense.
yeah, the marketing eats up a lot of time and yeah, I mean, it's still I mean, I wouldn't want to trade it for anything, but
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
mean,
that's another thing. You can be trad published and they still don't do a lot of, unless, so trad will only market your book if they think you're going to go bestseller.
yeah,
And so there's a lot that don't ever get a marketing budget.
yeah, or a little
Wow.
little itty bitty one.
Or they'll like put up a Goodreads giveaway and that's kind of the end of it. But if they look at you and they're like, you're going to go big. So like one publishing house that does this excellently is Fourth Wings Publishing House,
Yeah.
Red
Is it Red
Tower.
Tower?
Liz
Mhm.
is the editor there, and they market like crazy. They're really good at it, and that's why Fourth Wing did so well. I'm not to discredit Rebecca Yarros because obviously she is part of why that did well, but marketing makes a huge difference, right?
Huge.
Devin Carey just published with them, and Shield of Sparrows was the name of the story, and again, really killed it with marketing. And so it's just like
Marketing is huge. You can
if
have the
it,
best book in the
yeah,
world, but if nobody reads it, if nobody knows about it,
then you're screwed.
yeah, you need the marketing is essential. Yeah.
I always tell my husband, I'm like, I wish I could have the energy to market the way I marketed my debut. Like I killed it on marketing with my debut, but oh my god, the energy to keep that up is
I went all the way back to the very first post you had on
oh my
Instagram.
god.
Yeah, October 21st, 2022, I think it
Yeah,
was.
that sounds about right.
Um, yeah, and that kind of brought me to a question. I was like, so going back 3 years ago, or I guess 2.5
Yeah.
years ago, when you first did your debut novel, did you see your life the way it is now with the books that you have written? Like you explained that you're a very type A person, you're very organized, you plan, you plot, or has like things shifted and you're kind of in a different direction than what you thought you would be?
I think to JV's point, I didn't think I'd be writing what I'm planning to write next. I never planned to write in that genre. Um, as far when I wrote The End and Then, it was all written before I ever posted on Instagram, to be fair. Like I had written the book,
Same.
it had been edited, I had paid for a cover, all of that stuff before I ever launched my author Instagram. So at the point where I posted that, probably slightly different. But when I started, I didn't write The End and Then thinking I'll write this and then this and then this and then this. I wrote The End and Then because it was a story that I needed to tell and that needed to be heard. And
Mm-hmm.
when by the time I posted and like kind of really was like, okay, I'm going to do this, I had already started and was probably about halfway through writing What's Left of Me, which was the second book. I had never intended to write a book For Zoe, who is the main character in that book, it's a continuation of the end and then. But when I was writing her, I was like, there's a story that I need to tell for her. And I remember telling my sister, who one of the ones that is an author, who said, finishing the end and then told me I could do it. Finishing what's left of me told me I could do it again. And
That's
I
incredible.
think the minute that I finished what's left of me, I was like, okay, this is something that I can't imagine never not writing. I remember thinking, I've been writing my whole life, and so that's, one thing, but I remember telling my sister, I was like, I'm starting to think about things like, who finishes this book if I die? Like,
Wow.
what happens to these manuscripts? And that's something that authors actually have to write into their like will, like who gets this
Wow.
manuscript and who can finish it and that kind of thing. And so those became really like real aspects. And now even with the and this is probably part of my anxiety, and I have OCD, but with like the story that I have that I'm plotting, and that's to say I'm not writing actively right now because I'm 9 months pregnant, but I am actively plotting very heavily. um I think about like, what if something happens before I can publish it? Like that makes me really sad because it's like this story needs, I want it to be told so badly, and so that is almost like a fire under my ass that I'm like, I have to write it because I need it to be told, and I can't bear the idea of it not being told. And so I think that's how it's morphed kind of over the years, is that like once I wrote those first two and I knew I could do it again, and I I knew it wasn't like a fluke, I guess.
Yeah.
Um it was like, okay, this is who I'm going to be. And it was the first time I felt like I had found my purpose or like my place in the world versus, doing a day job. And obviously like I love my life and I love being my husband's wife and I'm excited to be my daughter's mother. But I think writing gave me my identity outside of those things. We talked about like parents being people outside of who they are to their children. Like writing is who I am. And it's who I am whether my husband exists, whether my child exists or not. And I can't imagine not doing it now because it is so heavily like who I am.
Wow. That is so beautiful. Oh my gosh, you almost made me cry. So, that was so beautiful. This is a weird question. It just popped in my head. Would you ever write your child a kid's book?
I don't really have like the brain for children's books. I'm sure
That's fair.
I never say never because I learned my lesson on that with the genre that I'm writing, but
Mhm.
I just have never like thought of one or considered it. It's funny how our brains are all different because the other day I was actually thinking about this. I think a lot of people, I don't know, I keep wanting to call you like your real name, and I'm trying to like force myself not to. Um, I don't know if this is something that you experience, but especially because of the genre that we write, people love to make comments about like, oh, what if your daughter reads your book one day?
So she does.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
cool. That doesn't bother me.
No.
I think that we've like made sex weird and people reduce our books to the fact that there's sex in them, but
Yes.
sex is not the point of my book. Like,
When they talk
sure.
about dragon porn for
Yeah. I'm like,
romantic, it pisses me off. I'm like, it's like 2%
of
of
the
the
whole story.
600-page novel.
Also, no one ever
Mhm.
accused, you know,
Like Game of
George R. R.
Thrones.
Martin of writing dragon porn, and his was far more graphic. But anyway, people love to
Yeah.
reduce it to that. And so they're like, oh, what if your daughter reads your book one day? Is that going to be embarrassing? And I'm like, no, not at all. Like,
No,
I
you know
think
what? I mean, we've talked about this before, and I'm a very like progressive, open person. I
Same.
was raised that way. I was
I
from
wasn't.
Germany. Oh, I
I
know.
was
That's how we're
raised
so different.
stark Christian. So,
Yeah. But I am very much
Me
like
too.
I think the less we mystify anything sex, especially women's sexuality, the
Yep.
better off our daughters will be because they're
Oh,
going to be
100%.
able to protect themselves. They're going to be able to tell
Yeah.
what they like and what they don't
Uh-huh.
like, and they know when to say no and set boundaries for themselves. And same for
Yep.
my son. I want him
Yep.
to know too. So I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
My daughters, they because what I do as part of my writing process is I will voice record my chapters and listen back. It
My
helps me step out of it. Yeah, and my daughters have heard this stuff. And so they'll
Mhm.
ask questions and then we have a great conversation about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, and to branch off of that, that's what the other day talking about like writing children's books and stuff like that. It's not so much that I would ever write a children's book for her, but I thought about like my daughter is named Hallie, and I was driving the other day and thinking about Hallie and thinking about her life, and I was like, God, I cannot wait. I feel such a tenderness for like the time when I was like dating and just like I'm not somebody who ever regrets relationships in general, like even the ones that fail.
Yeah.
I think they're all lessons, and I have fond moments from each one, and they've collectively made me who I needed to be ready to marry my husband, and I put little pieces of myself in all these stories. And I was just thinking about Hallie, and I thought about her reading my books, but I also thought about like what story I would write for her. Like, what love story would I write for Hallie? And like I would want her to feel worshipped and feel loved and feel
Girl,
silly and
yes.
feel adored and like have these funny moments, that because sex is funny sometimes, and like to have
And real.
those weird memories and stuff like that. Like I
That is
my
so, you know what? You make such a good point because I don't know that I ever consciously thought of it, but I am a slut for green flag guys. I like them broody,
yeah.
but I like green flags, and I think that's because I want my daughters to be with green flag guys. I want somebody who worships the ground they
Because you
walk on.
have a green flag
And
husband.
Yeah,
I
my
have a
husband is a
very green
walking
flag
green
husband.
flag, and that's what's so
Yeah,
funny.
and I love it. I don't, morally gray is fine, but
Yeah.
I don't want somebody who's an asshole to everyone but me. I don't need a
No.
billionaire. I don't need a mafia boss who like
I like
unalive
the
people.
mafia stories, but not generally the ones where like the guy is a jerk.
No billionaire romance. I know that was one of your least favorite tropes.
I really don't like billionaire romance. And it's so funny because the second book in mine and Allie's like little series of novellas has a billionaire, and I'm like but
Exposure therapy.
yeah, it literally is. But even like writing the book that I'm working on now with the guy, he is not like bad the way that so many of them are portrayed in that genre. He's more like, you know, his actually she's more morally gray than anything. And I think that's something that I kind of do throughout all of my books, is that I write a lot of really flawed women because I'm a
Yes,
flawed woman.
sure.
And
We all
We
are.
all are.
yeah, like
Spoiler alert.
I don't like these women that are I don't like reading characters that are just infallible creatures that are doormats for their red flag lovers.
Same.
I read and I write stories where women make mistakes, and women are vengeful, and women are upset and
And
because I think
unreasonable and all the
yeah, and
things.
unreasonable, and like I think we have kind of muted women so for so long, and even as women, like the reviews that come in on my books where the woman is not perfect and doesn't make the right decisions every time, people are like, why couldn't she just get it together? And it's like,
Because she can. Oh, girl, do you know
why do
what?
we
And then
expect her to get it together and not him?
right. You know what? It's the same thing for my books because my FMC, I mean, she's very young, but
Mhm.
so many comments I've gotten is like, oh, I would just wanted to shake her because she's
Somebody made
making these
that comment
dumb
about,
choices.
actually multiple people made that comment about Zoe, who is the main character in my second book, What's Left of Me. And Zoe is a domestic violence survivor.
Yes.
And I'm
Same,
like,
same with
do
my
you
FMC.
hear yourself?
Yeah, I wanted to shake her. My FMC,
Mhm.
same thing. And they're like, I wanted to shake her. Nobody says that about my MMC, who
No.
arguably makes equally as unreasonable
Uh-huh.
decisions as she does, just in a different way. And he's a trauma survivor too. And it's like nobody wants to shake him because
No.
it's okay for him to act like that, but a girl
Because
better
he's a
have
man.
her shit together. Yeah.
Yeah. Women are
The
expected
stigma.
to
Yeah.
always be perfect, to always behave, And I refuse to believe that. I was telling my co-author Allie for those novellas. She and I are alpha partners as well on our books, and I've been talking her through like the plot that I'm building, because I'm doing a lot of world building before I start. But I was telling her, I was like, what does it say about me that I'm like super excited that I get to write a scene where she like murders somebody, because and somebody who like deserves it, you know?
I love
And
those
I'm
scenes. I
like,
love a scene where a girl just like punches or
yeah,
gets, gets her vengeance. Okay,
yeah.
I think we're almost out of time. So I want to make sure you get a chance to plug. Is that the word, Tyler?
Yeah, let me do the thingy.
Do
Okay,
the
so we're
thingy.
trialing something here. I want to say thank you so much for being on. I know I wasn't super participating in the interview,
I
but it was
talk a lot, and it makes it hard
fascinating.
for anybody.
No, it was so comfortable. Honestly, it was so comfortable and it was so enlightening. And thank you for being our first ever
You're
guest on
For
Little
having
you
Prince.
me.
popped our cherry,
Uh,
Hannah.
I've only done
You're
that
so
once before
valid.
and never again. So this is much more. I prefer this.
Amazing. Okay, so we're gonna trial a thing. I'm going to say something and then you will take over.
Okay.
So,
Me or Hannah? I have not
Hannah, you've
gotten the
talked enough.
instructions
You talk.
before.
Ouch.
Shut up,
Do you
Julia.
have something you would like? Do you have something you would like to say before I do our outro?
Oh, this one's for me.
That's for you.
I got
Sweet,
thrown. I
Tyler.
got
No, no,
thrown
no, no,
by
no,
the
no,
whole
no.
thing.
No, that's not the thing. I was asking JV because I feel like she's got ants in her pants. She's so
Sorry, I'm like, what's going on right
okay.
now?
Okay. All right. Here is the outro. Hannah, the mic is yours. Let the people know what you got going on in your life.
Other than the
So
baby.
other than the baby, so Every Heartbeat After is my book that just came out. It's, as JV so kindly said, it's a little lighter than my other stuff, but it is still like the female main character is recovering from grief, and the male main character is dealing with family members with addiction and other things. And
I love Kit.
I love Kit so much. And so together they're like healing, but it's a summer romance, and it's set at a beautiful resort in Gulf Coast of Florida off the Gulf of Mexico. And
We're gonna
and
get flagged now.
yeah, it's like it was inspired by my childhood, which I loved growing up in that panhandle area. And so it's perfect for reading by the beach, reading by the pool this summer as it's about to get like really freaking hot. So it's available on Kindle Unlimited for free. It's available as a Kindle download, or of course on paperback wherever books are sold.
Do you direct sell?
I do. I have an Etsy store. It's linked on my Instagram.
Perfect. But direct buy from Hannah.
Yeah, if you
Mhm.
if you prefer that, I also have a an Etsy store, and I include cute little like character art and everything designed by the amazing Paige Moreland. So that's all.
Perfect.
You
Perfect,
did so
perfect. Okay.
good.
You did so good. We did have a hot take that we wanted to you submitted one.
Okay,
So let's talk about it quickly.
Really quick.
Um,
I can't remember. Oh,
JV,
it
you
was.
have
Do you remember what
yeah.
your hot take was, Hannah?
No.
It was okay. I'm quoting.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm over back talking FMCs and
Oh
fantasy.
yeah,
I'm sorry, but if you're facing down a 7 foot tall fake king, no way you're sassing him while facing certain death.
yeah.
I love that.
I stand by that.
I love it. I love it. He's like, I will squish you. But okay, little 4'9", 90 pound little FMC.
Yeah, I just it really grinds my gears when I'm
Love
reading a
it.
book. And this doesn't just go for fantasy, but it seems to be extremely prevalent in fantasy. This was one of my major icks with for the Fourth Wing series, is that like her mental dialogue was this like meek and mild little like oh, but then she'd randomly say shit talking back to somebody who supposedly wants to murder her, and it's like, no way in hell are you doing that. And it just really takes me out of the story, because I'm like, realistically, no one talks to somebody that way. And it just like not no one, but most people do not, and especially in that situation, like have some self-preservation. All right. Have some sense of like, maybe
No.
I should keep my trap shut until I figure out what's going on here. And I'm just like, I'm really past that. That's become so it's like authors are competing to say the sassiest thing or the like most shocking thing. And I'm like, I don't really love it, and I would love to read a female main character who is like intelligent and measured and has some sense of self-preservation and tries to like think through situations without sassing this person. And it's like, oh, yeah, that I loved Quicksilver, for example. Absolutely loved it. But definitely there were moments where I'm like, there's no way you're making an innuendo at this person that clearly wants to kill you within 2 seconds of meeting them. Like, there's just no way.
I can't wait to read Quicksilver. I've heard so many things about it. It's my
I really
September
enjoy
book for
it.
myself. Yeah, I hear it.
Do you want to do a buddy read?
What?
I'll do a buddy read.
Yeah, you should. It's
Because I
really,
haven't read
really
it
good.
either.
I can forgive some of the like things that people have complained about. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm very picky. So saying that I enjoyed it is, I
I
mean,
am picky
obviously it's all,
too.
all subjective, but I
Yeah,
found it entertaining. I found it unique, and I really liked it.
That's rare in the traditional publishing world if it's
Well, she's
unique.
not bad.
And a fantasy.
Well, she
she's not
wasn't
trash.
anyway.
Well, she wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah. If you find a
Oh,
unique
okay.
book, that's my favorite game to play at Target or other bookstores. I'll go through, and whoever's with me just is like, why do I care? But I'll point at every book and I go, she was indie, she was indie, she was indie, she was indie, she was indie. All the unique stories, they were indie first.
I love that.
Interesting, because I felt that way about Lightlark, Alex Astor.
Yeah.
I read her book Lightlark, and
She
I
was
think a
trad from
lot
the
of
get-go, I
books.
think.
She was indie and then got picked up, but there's a little bit of a backstory because I think her family is in the traditional publishing world. So she started as indie and then quickly moved into traditional.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, I'm not on TikTok much anymore because I have moral disagreements with some things. But I just know that she always would pop up on my thing. And I thought for some reason that she was trad from the start, but that was my misconception. I haven't read her story.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, I mean, here's the thing is for some reason, a lot of these books are very much trials and games.
Oh, yeah. Big
Like,
trope.
everything is a trial, everything is a
Uh-huh.
game, everything is to the death with different characters. Honestly,
Yeah,
that's pretty much.
I mean, it's a trope the way like in fantasy you have tropes just like you have in romance, but they're different. So instead of like billionaires and single moms and all that stuff, you have trials and games, you have dark academia, you have like Fae, you have the Omega verse, which I was trying to explain to my husband the other day, and let me tell you his face.
I just learned about Omega like 6 months ago. I was like, what is that? And then somebody's like, oh, they're shifters and alphas. And I was like, I had no idea.
Nodding to my husband, and he was like, what are you reading?
Is that a reference to Bride, Allie Hazelwood?
Okay, I love that book.
I it too.
Absolutely adored it. That was the first one I ever read that had nodding in it. But no, I was reading a book called The Flame King's Captive recently, and was explaining. I was actually explaining this to another member of our book club, JB. But I was like, I don't mind nodding as a concept, but that whole book, it was like he just kept talking about his nod as if it was like a third person.
My nod.
Yeah, my nod wants you and stuff like that, and I'm like, I
There's
finished
some
it.
weird things, yeah, there's just some weird stuff. But you know what? I'm like, again, it takes all kinds of kinds. Like it does it for you, it doesn't do it for me. But you know what? Like more fucking power to you.
I was telling my
here we
friend
go.
Allie recently, I was like, one of the coolest things about growing up is that all the women from the Bible that I was taught to villainize, I admire and understand now.
And are now your FMCs.
And are now my FMCs, like Lot's wife. I think about her a lot and her like turning to a pile of salt because she looked back. And I'm like, we were always taught that she was this evil person because she looked back and longed for her home. And I'm like, that is absurd. That's actually why Delilah is named Delilah, because my family, like, you never would hear people in the church community naming a child Delilah because she's villainized from the Bible.
Yeah.
My husband just didn't like the name. He's not religious, but so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use it in a book because, and that's actually a whole joke throughout the book, is that the MMC calls her Temptress because they grew up in rural Alabama, but he says it in a positive tone.
Mm-hmm. And then like an enriching or
Yes,
empowering tone.
exactly.
I love it. Okay, I don't know what you guys all have to do today. I gotta go get groceries. But honestly, this was so fun, and it would. I hope that you enjoyed yourself, and it wasn't your typical podcast interview because I was talking to JV and she was like, last week she was on an interview and I was like, did they read your book? And she's like, no. And I'm like, why are you on a podcast? Like, I'm going to be honest, I haven't read your books, but JV has. And our commitment to all of our guests is one of us will have read your book because that's the bare minimum we can do. If we want to have you on, we want to talk about your books, obviously, but we want to get to know you as a person, right? Like, you're so much more than just the words you put on paper. And I hope that you felt
I just
that.
love the opportunity to talk to other readers and readers and writers, but I just think there's something so precious about the community around like reading and being inspired by stories. Like, whether you consider yourself a novice reader or you've been reading your whole life, like, it's so enriching to get to talk to other people who go into those worlds, who fall in love with those characters, and it just it always is life-giving conversation. So I'm always thrilled to get to do that with other people.